just to give you a concept, behavioral finance, real simply put, it's a proposition that psychological influences and biases affect, people's financial behaviors. They're talking mostly about investors and financial practitioners, but also how just individual people treat money or think about money based on their personal biases. Um, it often is used to explain market anomalies, and it is one of those facets of academics anymore that's so important that the Security Exchange Commission has a whole staff devoted just to studying behavioral finance. So I'm going to go over some concepts of behavioral finance and how they work, and then we're going to look at some examples as we go along. Um, I think the key thing to take away from here is think about this personally as yourself, and then try to internalize it, because it's one of those things where even when I first learned about this, my thought process was, oh yeah, of course, and then you think about it for 10 seconds and you're like, oh wait, I've made that same mistake God knows how many times. So hopefully this will be helpful. I'm positive it will be, but we'll go through it. So let's look at some common mistakes, common biases people make. Okay, so the first one's going to be confirmation bias. Basically, that's just accepting info that confirms your beliefs and ignoring information that contradicts it. Okay, so if we've done this example before. If I'm a detective and I go to a crime scene and I'm convinced the butler did it, and there's no evidence of a butler or anything, I can ignore that and just go, well, yeah, but I'm positive the butler did it. And everybody could be like, well, no, I mean, the guy obviously died of a heart attack. That wasn't a murder. I'm like, but see, the butler planned it that way, and that's how we know. They could be like, well, the guy doesn't have a butler. But it was somebody else's butler. I could start spinning things, right? See, there's a tea set. Butlers serve tea. So I'm looking for evidence that confirms my opinion already, as opposed to using the actual evidence to draw a conclusion. So it's basically, you use evidence to draw a conclusion. Confirmation bias is when you've drawn the conclusion and you try to manipulate the evidence to meet your conclusion. So it's just doing things backwards. Experiential bias is not entirely dissimilar. It's when you use memories of recent events and you think about it. It's like, okay, well, this happened, so it's probably going to happen again. The 2008 housing crisis is a great example. When the market crashed, a lot of people sold, got out. They were, made that mistake, and they were scared and terrified that it was going to happen again. It was going to continue that way, and it was just going to get worse and worse and worse. Well, within a year, the market had shot back up. It was a little over a year. It was like a year and 6 months. It had gotten back to where it was. But they were so convinced it was going to go down again that people didn't get back in. And by the time they did, they lost all the gains they could have had they just stayed in the market. So just their experience taught them, don't do this, when they shouldn't have been going off of their recent experience. That's just a simple example of that. In sports, this is often considered the hot hands fallacy sometimes. So let's say I'm watching a basketball game and I have a guy, he's made 6 shots in a row. He's on fire, right? Well, the assumption is he's going to make the 7th shot, right? So if I bet $1,000 that he'll make the 7th shot, well, the past 6 shots doesn't mean he'll make the 7th. Something could change and he might miss. So you're using your experience and or recent experience especially, and trying to make an assumption about the future, which you really cannot reasonably do. The third one on this list is loss aversion. So loss aversion is just your fear of losing money over your potential gain, right? And it's what it costs is opportunity cost. So I'm so afraid if I invest $10,000 into my friend's business that I'm going to lose that. I'm more afraid of losing that money than I am of gaining money, right? Now, it might be that it's actually a really good deal and my friend makes a ton of money and that 10,000 could turn into 100,000 for me. But I was so afraid of losing it, I just held it. So what I did was I lost the opportunity of making money with my money. So if you just hold on to it all the time, you're not getting your money to work for you. So loss aversion can be very, very negative, um, especially if you never take any risk at all whatsoever because you're afraid of losing. Um, probably the most common familiarity bias next to confirmation bias. People just invest in what they know, what they trust, but this tends to lead them to a lack of being diversified, being strategically planned, right? I know the car industry really well. I know the housing industry really well, for example, for 2008, right? So I invest all my money in the housing industry because that's what I know, and then it collapses. So I'm not diversified. I don't have other options. So I'm tied to one thing. So you want to be a little bit more diverse and clever about how you do things, not just stick with what you know all the time. So those are the common biases that